What happens when you treat your composting recipe like Heisenberg from the Breaking Bad? You get an accelerated decomposition process. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you 4 composting recipes that most of the ingredients will be at your place or around you. They won't be hard to find. With that said, let's get into the video. Before we get into the first composting recipe, throughout this video, during each recipe, I mention 1 part or 2 parts. So for example, say you're using handfuls as your measurement tool, 1 part will be 1 handful, 2 parts will be 2 handfuls, so twice as much. And just to keep it simple, that's what I'm referring to in this video. All the recipes in this video add up to around a 30:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And by keeping it around that area, you're speeding up the decomposition process, so it's the fastest decomposition you can possibly get with that ratio, other than how you maintain your compost pile. But as far as the ingredients go, that's the fastest. To find out your carbon to nitrogen ratio and to try to add it up and keep it at 30:1, say you have something that's a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio and you have 3 parts in your pile. You go 20 plus 20 plus 20, which is 60. And then because you have 3 parts, you divide that 60 by 3, which would give you a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And it's a bit lower than your 30:1 that you're trying to shoot for. So then you'd add an item that's a lot higher with carbon. So you can do it with a bunch of different organic materials, but I'll teach you guys in this video. Now, let's see what's in the composting recipe and get into the video. So composting recipe number 1 is 3 parts grass clippings and 1 part fallen leaves. This recipe is great for someone that lives in a colder climate. You don't have a lot of outdoors organic material throughout your winter. So you can stock up on the grass clippings in the summer, stock up on the leaves in the fall, and use it all winter long for your compost pile. Grass clippings is a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio, and leaves are a 60:1. So what you would do is you would take your 20:1, and because you have 3 parts, you go 20, 40, 60. Then you'd add your 60 for your leaves, which would give you 120. And then you have 4 parts. So you go 120 divided by 4, which gives you a perfect 30:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The only downside to this combination is it will be a lot drier than some of the other recipes. So you'll have to add more water on a regular basis just to get the compost bacteria going. With your compost recipe, you want to keep your moisture between 50 and 60%. This just allows your bacteria to grow. So the greens in your recipe are going to add the moisture for the most part, and then the browns are going to level off the moisture. So your browns are going to be the grass clippings, the leaves. The greens can be your food waste, your plant trimmings, your garden clippings. The problem with adding more nitrogen than carbons is you will have a way higher moisture level in your compost pile, and your pile is going to start smelling or rot, and it's going to slow down the decomposition process in general. So you always want to add carbons and nitrogens. That's just the perfect balance in your pile. So the composting recipe number 2 is 2 parts coffee grounds, 1 part food waste, and 1 part fallen leaves. So this recipe is really good if you drink coffee and you cook at home. You have most of these ingredients. When I refer to food waste, you can break everything down into separate categories, like vegetables, fruits, and food. But on an average, I've combined everything together and took the average of what all the carbon to nitrogen ratios would be. So this is going to be a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio in the calculations. I didn't go as far as breaking everything apart and making a separate recipe because most people aren't going to separate all these items. So for the coffee, it's a 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And because I got 2 parts, so you go 20 plus 20. Your food waste is going to be 28:1, so plus 28. And your fallen leaves are a 60:1. So you go 20 plus 20 plus 28 plus 60, which gives you 128. And because you have 4 parts, divided by 4, which will give you a 32:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio, which is a bit higher, but as long as you're within the ballpark of a 30:1, it's all good. Whenever you start any new compost, you want to add either healthy soil, or the better option is adding finished compost into your compost pile. Say you've already made some finished compost. When you take it out and use it, leave a little bit still in the compost bin before you add your new ingredients into the mix. And what this does is it just accelerates the bacteria growth because the finished compost already has the bacteria within it. And if you've never started compost before, then you can use a compost starter. You can buy that stuff online. I'll link to a good compost starter in the description below for you guys. So for the third compost recipe, you're gonna have 2 parts food waste, 1 part garden waste, 1 part weeds, and 1 part hay. This compost recipe is great for everyday gardeners. It's really good in the summer. You can take your garden waste or all your trimmings, you can take your weeds and you can throw that into your compost pile. Just make sure that the weeds don't have seeds in them. And if they do, then just add more garden waste to level out the carbon to nitrogen ratio. With the hay, you can easily put a Facebook ad online and ask a farmer if they have any extra hay barrels that you can have for free or you can buy off of them. You can also add hay as a mulch in your garden. Your garden waste is a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Your food waste is a 28-to-1 and you have 2 parts. Your weeds is a 30-to-1 as well, and your hay is going to be a 25-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. And it gives you a 141 and you have 5 parts. So you go 141 divided by 5, which gives you a 28.25 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. With the amount of greens in this composting recipe and the carbon to nitrogen ratio being 28.25 to 1, I would add more hay into the mix just to keep the pile less moist. You're probably gonna be above 60%. So add more hay, level off the moisture, and you're good to go. One thing I didn't mention is for your organic material, the smaller it is, the more surface area that the bacteria can work with, so the faster it'll decompose. So as you go, chop your organic material up before adding it to the pile. So compost recipe number 4 is 1 part manure, which my favorite are horse, cow, or rabbit, 1 part food waste, 1 part garden waste, 1 part straw, and 1 part grass clippings. So one of the tips is this is actually straw and rabbit poop combined. So a guy on Facebook Marketplace under the free section was giving a bunch of this away. So I just looked, found it, grabbed some garbage bags full, I think it was like 3, and I stocked up on this when I could, and you guys can do the same. So the manure is a 15-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The food waste is a 28-to-1. The grass clippings is a 20-to-1. The garden waste is a 30-to-1. And the straw is a 75-to-1. And that adds up to 168. And because you got 5 parts, 168 divided by 5 is 33.6 to 1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. For these composting recipes, I tried to make them so the majority of you guys would be able to do one of them or all of them. So I did add the food waste into majority of the recipes. And that's so if you don't cook now, you can start cooking. You can start acquiring the food waste, and hopefully it helps you guys. Also in the comments below, mention what you guys are gonna be composting. If there's something that's stunting you guys, then just mention it in the description below. I'd love to hear your guys' recipes and a different take on what you guys have to compost. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, you got something out of it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I appreciate it dearly. See you guys in the next video.